So I want to welcome you all to SEO and AEO for channel marketers. And today what we're going to talk about is how to win in AI-powered search. So thank you for joining us. My name is Josh Welch. I'm the Director of Solutions Consulting here at Ansira, where I spend most of my time helping organizations untangle complexity and turn big ideas into systems that actually work in the real world. Today, I have the privilege of introducing our topic, but most importantly, of introducing the experts who are going to be walking us through these topics. If you've been feeling a little uncertain about how AI-powered search is changing the rules of discoverability, you're not alone. From ChatGPT to Google's AI overviews, the way customers find brands, locations, and answers, it's shifting fast. So for channel marketers, that shift is raising some big concerns. Who actually controls your brand narrative when AI is generating the answers? How do you balance consistent corporate messaging with the need for local relevance across agents, across dealers, franchisees, or partners? And maybe even more importantly, where do you even start? That's exactly what today's webinar is going to be all about. So in this session, we're going to cut through the noise around SEO and answer engine optimization, AEO, and focus on what actually works in an AI-driven search landscape at both the brand and the local level. We'll walk through how AI search is impacting click-through rates, your visibility, and trust, and what that means for distributed organizations. What we hope you leave with are practical guidance on optimizing for both brand and local partner visibility, knowing when to tightly control messaging versus when to empower those local dealers or partners with their customization, and how unified technology can help you scale SEO and AEO across your entire network. Along the way, we'll share real-world examples from insurance, automotive, finance, and franchise brands. So we're going to show how centralized and decentralized organizations are tackling AI search challenges today. So to help us unpack all of this, I'm joined by two experts who live and breathe in this space. First, we have Mick Gier, who is the Senior Director of Earned and Owned Media here at Ansira. Mick leads cross-functional teams across SEO, content, and performance marketing, helping multi-location and automotive brands drive growth in an ever-changing search landscape. Over the course of his career, he's built high-performing teams, refined scalable processes, and he's helped shape marketing solutions that evolve right alongside industry change. Joining Mick is Eric Molitor, Organic Media Lead Analyst here at Ansira. Eric focuses on SEO and AI-driven optimization and has been with Ansira since 2017. He has more than 13 years of experience managing some of the highest traffic websites across multiple verticals. Eric brings deep technical expertise and a practical, data-driven approach to how brands can stay visible as search continues to evolve. Together, they're going to share what's actually working today and what channel marketers should be paying attention to next. So let's take a look at our agenda. All right, so I'm not going to read these line by line, just going to point out these are some of the things we're going to talk about from search, focusing on centralized, decentralized, all of these topics from the experts. The Q&A at the end, that's extremely important, and it does involve some crowd participation. We took some questions leading up to this, and then during this conversation, please feel free to use that chat and drop your questions in as we go. I'm going to stop for now and pass things over to the experts so they can start guiding us through this journey.
Perfect. Thank you, Josh. I want you to introduce me for all my meetings because those were some very nice things you said about me. So
Well deserved.
as you have questions as we go through this, like Josh said, put them in the chat. We're going to get through that in the Q&A session. We probably won't do like live question responses just to make sure we can get through everything, and then we'll have a dedicated Q&A session, which will probably lead to some more questions, which will be great. So like Josh said, our topic today, understanding AEO, how it all fits into search. When we say AEO, we mean answer engine optimization. That could also, you might have also heard things like GEO for generative engine optimization. We were for a little while hearing LLMO, large language model optimization. That one's kind of fallen off. But it all basically means how do we optimize our brand's visibility for an AI-based search? If someone's doing a search and they get an AI overview in Google, or if they're going to a tool like ChatGPT or Perplexity, how do we make sure we're there and front and center? To kind of ground ourselves in this conversation, we just want to do a little bit of a comparison between traditional and AI search, make sure we're all on the same page, talk about some of the significant differences that we need to start preparing for or evolving our existing strategies to best address. Traditional search, when we talk about traditional, we're talking about things like the Google search of yesteryear, Bing, Yahoo, DuckDuckGo, those search engines where you go type in a simple request, you get a simple answer. These are great for quick actions, clicks to websites, phone calls, getting directions, or a quick piece of information. In 2025, traditional search was responsible for 96% of website traffic. And that's through organic, paid, other traditional search mediums. It's not just organic traffic, but collectively, website traffic primarily is driven through traditional search today and through the start of this year. Success has been tracked by things like keyword volume and position and visibility. So whether you're running an organic strategy or a paid strategy, things like impressions and clicks have always been really important, and then click-through rates and conversions. AI search is a little bit of a different game. What AI search allows us to do is ask really complex questions that can have multiple criteria or dimensions. A great example, one of the first searches I ever did with AI search to kind of test it was ask, can you prepare a list of 5 meals for a family of 4 that uses a variety of meats, grains, and vegetables? Give me a list of the recipes and sort that list by the section of the store where I would get each of those ingredients. I could never ask that question of Google or Bing before because there's no article that addresses that specific question. What AI can do, though, is it can collate information from different articles, piece it all together, and actually give you that output. And now this isn't like a research topic, but it is a great question that has a bunch of different dimensions and a bunch of different requirements. And as we as users start to understand that AI search can help us with these types of questions, we're going to see the queries, the questions, the prompts that people use really enhance and grow and change in ways that we haven't quite seen yet. It depends on who you ask, but certain projections predict that AI search will be responsible for over 50% of all website traffic by 2028. 2028 feels like it's a long way from now. It's actually only 24 months from now. And I think all of us in the marketing space understand how busy our days feel, how quickly those months tend to fly by. 2028 will be here before we know it. And it's one of those things that's difficult to project because we don't yet know all the ways that AI will be injected into our daily lives. Right now, a lot of the talk is about AI search and those AI search engines, but we're also seeing enhanced ways that brands are using AI to monetize or enable purchases. We're going to see AI injected into things like cars later this year or early next year. So it's going to weave its way into our daily lives. It's here to stay. And we're going to see how that continues as time moves on. And then success. Measuring success in AI search is very much an emerging field. We haven't yet established as an industry best practices or core KPIs. We are trying to track things like citations. So if a user asks a question that's related to your brand or product or service, is your website cited as one of those sources that addresses that question? That's really important. Presence. For questions, again, related to your brand or vertical, how often do you show up in those answers? Whether you're referenced by the AI or cited by the AI, we want to make sure we're there. And then one of the really big surprises with AI search has been the sentiment of your brand. So AI looks at your holistic digital footprint. So not just what you say about yourself, but what other people are saying about you. And it uses that information to form an opinion when it gives a response to a user's prompt. And so that opinion could be positive, could be neutral, could be negative. We never really had to worry about would Google portray my brand in a positive or negative light before, but we do now with AI search. And so brand sentiment is a KPI we're kind of trying to refine internally. We're building some tools ourselves to better measure brand sentiment because it's an emerging piece of the visibility puzzle when it comes to how AI represents your brand. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about how success is measured, we published a blog post I think it was on the 13th or so 8 or 9 days ago, that you can go read. It's on the ansira.com/blog page. think if Josh would be so kind, he might have that link handy to dump into the chat. That's got some great information about how we're thinking about measuring AI search success. And you can think about how that might evolve your existing strategies. Before we get into maybe recommendations, let's just talk about the user journey and what that looks like. This is a traditional search user flow. If anyone's tried to use Google or Bing to research a topic to get to a purchasing decision, this might be familiar to you, where you do a search, you open an article, you do some reading, you go back, you go to the next article, you go back. You might go to a reviews website. You might go to YouTube and watch a product review. And you use all this information to either end up at a brand website or build your shortlist. If you're like me, you open all this information in a bunch of different tabs and you kind of shrink the list of available options. So if I'm looking for new running shoes for this year, I might develop my short list of 4 brands and then go look at colors, availability, size availability, things like that. And that's kind of my traditional search experience. It's forward and backwards and forward and backwards and doing all this research. This has been what we've all known. We've just kind of gotten used to it. It's what's available to us. We hadn't really thought about, gosh, I wish there was a better way to do this. Well, AI provides a very different way to do this, and in a lot of cases, it is going to be a better way. And we're seeing that with user search behavior. I can ask AI the best men's running shoe for a rainy Pacific Northwest winter. And AI will summarize my options for me. If I ask a question like this, it's probably going to give me a table and it's going to have make and model. It's going to have pros and cons of each of them. If it's smart, it'll probably give me a price range and it'll give me user sentiment. So what are users saying? What are real people saying about these shoes, not just what's the brand telling me about this shoe? And I can ask follow-ups. Maybe it doesn't give me any waterproof options. I'm like, well, I really want only weather resistant or waterproof options. I can ask it to update the list. It does that in a couple seconds. And then I've got my short list of options. And I can go right to those websites and again, compare colors, availability, sizing, things like that. It takes that research process and it really shrinks it. And it actually makes it a lot easier. Because before, if I wanted to like understand what all those shoe options were and then look at waterproof options, that just takes a lot of time. AI makes it really easy. So as consumers start to acclimate to this, we're going to start asking different questions and asking different prompts. So one of the things as marketers we want to be prepared for is understanding, okay, I know what I've been doing from maybe a search perspective or a content perspective. How do I adapt or change those things to be successful in traditional search, which is going to stick around, and AI search, which we all expect will continue to grow. I think we should start with some good news. The good news is that a lot of the best practices we've been using, particularly in the SEO world, but also like web design best practices, perform really well in AI search. One of the first things that Eric and I saw when AI search really burst onto the scene was immediate success with our websites. We focus a lot on building high quality content into our web design. We have a strong opinion that focusing too much on purely keyword rankings is a way to kind of get left behind by ongoing Google updates. And so we've focused for a number of years on high quality content. And we saw immediate success with some of the pages that we built for our customers showing up as either being cited in AI search or being referenced directly in AI search. If you think about the way that AI functions, this actually makes a lot of sense. AI functions at a fundamental level very similar to traditional search engines. In order for AI to give you an answer, it has to go out onto the web, crawl all these websites, and pull it back in. And so a lot of the strong websites, good best practices that we've been using today, up until today, for like SEO strategies, actually play really well with an AEO strategy. So things like a really clean and simple website design, strong content management and high quality content, technical best practices. If these things were already in place, you're going to have a leg up over competitors who maybe don't have that. Where we see this story evolving or maybe changing a little bit is some of the things that we used to think of as maybe nice to haves or should haves are really becoming must haves. The first thing I've got on my list here for a must have is schema. Schema is a technical piece of code that we can put into a website's backend that allows us to communicate very directly with web crawlers. So web crawlers are what search engines like Google, like ChatGPT and Perplexity use to gather information about websites. Consumers and users never see this because it's in the backend, but it's basically a translation of the website directly into a language that search engines can read because they don't see websites the same way that we do. So schema, we found that because AI engines crawl websites so much more frequently than traditional search engines used to, having a website that's really easy for them to understand has become more important. And it's becoming an industry recommendation to have schema and clean site design on your website. One really new area that has surprised us is how important reputation management and brand management has become in the age of AI search. This is not something that really anybody saw coming, but it really leads me to the third point here on the left, which is that AI looks at your brand's holistic digital footprint when it informs a user or tries to give a user an opinion about your brand. By holistic digital footprint, I mean any digital content written about your brand that the AI can access. So obviously your website, things like your Google Business Profile, things like reviews on your Google Business Profile, but not just your GBP reviews. If you've got reviews on Yelp or if you've got reviews on Angie's List, if you've got third-party reviews anywhere that are publicly available, AI is going to find it. If there's publicly available social media conversations that's happening about your brand or your product, AI is going to find it. If users are having forum discussions, if there are Reddit threads, AI is grabbing all of this information, ingesting it, and translating it to answer a user's question. Whether that's great conversation, bad conversation, AI doesn't care. It's going to give it to the user and surface that material. So this is where we as marketers really need to start thinking about our brand perception and not just along the lines that we control, not just along our own properties, but along the lines of what other people say about us, along those earned mentions, whether we like those earned mentions or not. So let's dig into a couple of different recommendations. We think your web platform really matters. We think having a web platform that allows you to scale your partners' websites, allows you to localize individual partner websites for their local areas, allows you to scale schema really effectively and localize that automatically. It's going to be really important for having an effective, easy to deploy website solution that allows you to separate yourself positively in AI search while also playing really well with traditional search. Recommendation number two is in the vein of considering your holistic digital footprint, thinking about things like reputation management, specifically review management, listings, so all the various places where your local partners might be listed as an individual business, and social media. These are all things that AI uses to inform users about your brand, your partners, your products, and your services. Because AI is reading all this and accessing all of this, we think it's now more important than ever to manage and monitor these different channels, and then provide guidance for local partners on how they can do that themselves. And how you do this is really going to depend on whether you're a really centralized brand that controls a lot of that marketing, or whether you're a decentralized brand who's more in an influential role. And Eric in a few slides is going to really dig into those two differences and help talk about, some of the hurdles for each, but also some of the solutions for each. Now, I've mentioned user reviews and social media a couple of times here. I just want to mention we published an article back in November about how user reviews and social media very specifically shape a brand's image in AI search. So feel free to track that down. And once we send this deck out, you'll have the link here so you can take a look at that as well. I think it's got some great information for brands, specifically brand to local marketers, to consider how this is going to impact your total brand reputation and recognition.
And Mick, these best practices, they're incredible. And I can see where they're going to be really impactful for the organizations who embrace them. Not to put you on the spot, but does it seem like this could be it kind of seems like this could be a good place to ask this question. How hard is it for these organizations to own that holistic digital footprint? Is it really entirely in their control?
Um, that's a good question. I think because it's making me pause for thought. I think there are two I think it depends, Josh. It depends on whether depends on how much control you have over that brand message. So I think a lot of it depends on centralized versus that decentralized setup. Um, if you have a strong, website, social media, reputation management program within your brand sort of ecosystem that local partners are using and accessing, that's actually going to be pretty easy and you've got a good step up. If we haven't been thinking about things like high quality content across our website system, or we haven't been thinking about things like a consistent brand message and tone, then we've got some work to do, to be honest. But so does everybody else, right? I think one of the key things to keep in mind here is like this is not new for just some of us. This is new for all of us, and all of us are really trying to figure out the best way to do this. So any action that you take today or tomorrow is already giving you a leg up on your competition and better preparing you to kind of position yourself well in this AI first world. Um, I had an example of how we could build a program like this, which I think relates really well to that question you just asked, Josh, which is if we want to think about one of these new avenues that's important for AI visibility, because if you think about it from an SEO perspective, and that's mine and Eric's background, from an SEO perspective, we've always been accountable for things like how you appear in a Google search result. How high up are you on the list? And what we've been accountable for is that visibility. When someone does a search that's relevant to you or your brand, how are you visible? Well, now that we're thinking about things like AI search, which uses reputation management and social media and community discussions to inform opinion about your brand, we need to expand our understanding of what influences search visibility and how can we influence those things. So we wanted to put forward an example here of how you might build a social media program to help you do this. This is using a brand to local content governance system that allows you as the brand to say, here are the things about our brand that are non-negotiable. Things like the assets that we use, our color palette, our brand voice, whether that's lighthearted or whether that's serious. And these help you define a consistent brand look and feel. And then what you can do is establish guardrails for individual retailers or partners that allow them to flex or localize that content as you deem appropriate. And that can be things like injecting specific messaging for their store or as simple as hours, address, store name. What this does is it creates a system where you can push content out really widely to your network, and you have faith that that content is meeting your brand guidelines while also allowing flexibility. And so what we've done is to AI is we've created this consistent brand message that rings true at a national brand level, but also rings true at all these local levels with local users like you and I who are looking for individual products to buy and we see, oh, like I saw this social media post on Instagram from the brand a few days ago, clearly a branding exercise, and I saw a very similar asset that has the same color palette, that has the same tone, but it also leads me to an individual store that's just 15 minutes away. I do need one of those products, or I do want to check those out, and I have, as a consumer, I have trust because this brand consistency is the same across these different mediums. The people who wrote these AI algorithms, they know that we as consumers like this brand consistency and that builds trust. And so the AIs also trust consistent brand messaging. So this is just an example of how we might think about a program that's outside the bounds of a traditional SEO strategy, but is really important when we think about answer engine or generative engine optimization. Now, I'm going to take a break and we're going to turn it over to Eric, who's going to dive into this, how we approach this from either a centralized or a decentralized marketing ecosystem. There are some different challenges, there are some different hurdles, but also some different ways to solve those problems. So, Eric, take us away.
Thank you, Mick. Hello, everyone. All right, so let's get a little more close to the ground here, probably a little bit closer to your day-to-day operations. So what we're going to go through here is centralized and decentralized marketing ecosystems, particularly challenges and hurdles, and then some high-level solutioning, how we would get around that. So Ideally, if you are unaware of some of these, we can present you with potential paths forward. And apologies in advance for stacking more trouble on your plate. If you do know about these already, or regardless, we want to encourage you to seek solutions. I guarantee that there are ways to fix these problems out in the market. We want to try to get through that with you and for you in this webinar. So I do want to take just a brief moment here to kind of highlight what it is exactly that I'm going to be talking about when we say centralized and decentralized marketing ecosystems. Centralized is the idea that you are a corporate entity that is delineating your marketing down to rooftops. So, you kind of own it and you push it to your rooftops. They have either limited or no say in what's going on there. And then when we're talking about a decentralized marketing ecosystem, that's where your rooftops have a lot more autonomy. Neither of these are inherently better or worse than the other. They both have hurdles. There is some overlap, obviously, but let's take a look, I believe, centralized first here at kind of what some of these challenges might be. So if you're working in a centralized marketing ecosystem, again, if you are a singular corporate entity driving this down to your brands and your rooftops, localization, it can be difficult. So there are always going to be differences between areas of the country or internationally that are going to create difficulty in generating and deploying a unified marketing strategy, particularly at scale. People on the West Coast of the United States are going to be a little bit different than on the East Coast. I know that we have some people from Toronto in here. That's going to be a little bit different even than my Detroit, which is so close to Canada that most people in the United States mistake me for being Canadian. So these localization differences can create some friction in deploying this at scale. When you do deploy your strategy at scale, another issue with number two is live by the sword, die by the sword, which is a super dramatic way to put that the effectiveness hinges on your strategy working. So it's important to keep in mind as you deploy a centralized strategy from one centralized location down to lots and lots of rooftops, that if there are gaps or potential missteps, which may not be anybody's fault, but it can create fragmentation and it can also create some friction again. The rooftops are looking to you to answer the questions and to fix the problems. It can be difficult if you're using one unified strategy that may have a little bit of an issue with it. So once you've deployed your strategy and ideally you're getting some information back on how that effect is coming into play, how do you start balancing top and bottom performers? This is particularly unique with the localization, and they're kind of a 1-2 punch and a bit of a tandem. How do you enable your top performers to reach new heights? And also, as importantly, how do you influence or change the performance of lower performers to get up to that level? Within the localization of any brand, there are naturally going to be some distinctions, right? Some of the rooftops are just naturally going to sit in better markets. There may be more people. They may be more keyed into the products and services that you're offering. So being able to identify and flatten out those differences is going to be really important to push your brand forward. And that's part of the ever-changing world then as we move through this, right? So as you try to flatten out a strategy that's going to work for everybody, things change really rapidly. So if you spend a lot of time troubleshooting and deploying this strategy and then going back to fix any errors that may have happened during either the construction of the strategy or your implementation of it, things may have already changed. And the best example of this, as Mick pointed out earlier, is artificial intelligence. In the middle of 2024, I myself was building strategies that had nothing to do with AI. And by the middle of 2025, if we didn't change and adapt quickly, we were already very much behind the eight ball on that. So it's a great example of how fast these things change and how quickly you need to be on top of those changes. So how do you stay on top of those changes? Analytics, numbers. You need to make sure that you have as up-to-date information, meaningful KPIs that can help you drive success as possible. But in a centralized ecosystem, that can be very difficult because it can be a lot of data. You can be aggregating tons and tons of information. So what matters? Why does it matter? And what insights can you glean from that information to turn it into actionable insights? So on our next slide, we'll take a look at kind of what we would aim to do here. So these may seem a little bit straightforward, but as you get into the granularity of it, it can start to become really, really complicated. So I want to stress on both centralized and decentralized that a lot of this hinges on expertise and experience and knowledge, right? We want to know what we're doing. So expertly crafted and flexible SEO and AI strategies that you can push to your rooftops are paramount in a centralized ecosystem, and that's where the expertise and experience comes in. If you don't have a ton of marketing experience, or if your plate is just very full, as I believe a lot of ours probably are right now, it's important to make sure that you have somebody, either a trusted partner or an internal resource, it's able to identify potential pitfalls before it gets deployed to make sure that you're boosting that visibility, both through traditional SEO, which still has tons of applications, and now this new world of AI and large language models. Robust analytics and tracking are the way in our industry that we make those decisions. So it's important that you're able to take data and inform strategy. We don't want to fire from the hip and just make decisions based on our gut feeling because oftentimes it can be wrong. Sometimes it can be right, and that's super cool and it feels really, really good. But for my money, I don't want to hedge that bet too often. So we want to be able to aggregate our analytics, particularly at scale, and develop some sort of roll up or aggregate reporting that'll be able to pull insights from the data. Once we have that, we want to deploy enabled content at scale. And that's the real asterisk here, right? Is at scale. Doing it on one website is one thing, but doing it across a network of 50, 100, 250 websites is a completely different animal. And it creates a lot of different pitfalls. How do you make sure that there isn't duplicated content that you'll get penalized for? How do you make sure that each and every one of your rooftops is unique and authoritative enough that not only traditional search engines like Google and Bing, but now Google Gemini, ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc., are going to be finding you and showing you high on those results so that you are one of the first, if not the first name that comes up. Mick also talked about the new KPIs that we're exploring. Brand sentiment is one of them. Large language model prompts are also a unique beast, right? So traditionally, what we would be looking at is how do you rank on Google, which was a pretty straightforward answer, right? We have tools that tell us with a number how well you're doing. Large language model prompts create a much more unique hurdle in that they are very conversational. So while you may be appearing, the sentiment may not be great, or the information may not even be accurate sometimes. We're probably all aware of large language model hallucinations and spitting out things that either aren't true or aren't completely true. So how do you monitor that accuracy and precision on their responses of your business? So these are all blossoming KPIs that we need to make sure we're aware of. And once we have a handle on all of that, making strategic adjustments, right? So we track keyword positioning and impressions and clicks and where those come from, user behavior on the website, large language model prompt responses, brand sentiment, all of this stuff in a big report that we then need to take actionable insights to make strategic adjustments to improve that visibility, accuracy, and perception. So that in a nutshell is kind of where we go from centralized as we move into decentralized. And I do just want to reiterate real quick, if this seems crazy or out of reach, right? If traditional SEO is still something that was you were scratching your head on, and now we're moving into this world of answer engine optimization and generative engine optimization, I promise that there are solutions out there for all of these. The reporting, the deployment, all of this stuff can get fixed. So reach out to Josh or Mick or myself or anybody involved, and we'll be able to at least help point you in the right direction on what some of these solutions might be. Okay, that being said, so now we're moving away from the world of a centralized network into a decentralized network. And just to go back to this real quick, what we're talking about here is you're a corporate entity, or maybe you are a rooftop and you don't have the necessarily the guidance or the control over each individual rooftop. The automotive industry is a really good example of this when we talk about car dealerships, not only the distinction between OEM manufacturers like General Motors and Ford, but even within what we would call large dealership groups. Oftentimes their individual rooftop brand names are different. That comes with individually led marketing efforts. Sometimes they have different names, they have different logos, right? So there's a lot of customer assurance issues that can come with that. So how do you push through as a decentralized network to all of your individual rooftops that you're the same brand, you're providing the same assurances, you're providing the same voice and the same value? That can create a lot of hurdles for you as a decentralized either a rooftop or as part of the brand center there. So that creates the idea that in point two, we have unique needs for everybody. They have unique branding, they may have unique positioning. They also then have unique needs. So what does their SEO and AI success look like, and how do you support that at a brand level? They may have different targeting requirements. Going back and tying this into number three, budget and opportunity, they may be in a part of the country or the world where they're more inherently benefited by where they are. They just might have more people that are interested in what you're selling than some of the other rooftops. So, how do you balance that? Because the budgets may be different, the targeting may be different, the SEO and AI may be different. As I brought up earlier, the vernacular on one side of the country or one side of the world is going to be different than it is elsewhere. So, how do you balance all of that while you're generating a strategy that's going to help everybody? And then implementation hurdles, once you've developed that strategy, becomes much more complicated in a decentralized network. The main reason for that is you might be working with dozens, if not hundreds, of independent, what would essentially be contractors to a centralized network, right? You're going to talk to all these different rooftops who may have different teams, marketing teams, development teams, different team members internally that are running all of this stuff. That can create a lot of friction and a lot of mess in your ability to implement change at scale quickly. It's not noted here, but the speed and dynamic approach is the same in the decentralized network as it would be in centralized. So you need to make sure you're making changes quickly. And then even more so than a centralized network, the same reason that we have trouble with implementation hurdles, analytics creates a big problem. How do you aggregate 100 different rooftops data when they're all disparate and apart, and they probably have different teams running them? They might be on different platforms. They might not have analytics the way that you want to pull it. So how do you get all of that and measure that progress at scale? So let's take a look at some of those solutions then. The first and biggest thing is that you want to try to find some common threads that'll flatten the discrepancies. A lot of this can be driven from the brand. Again, if we're talking about a lot of rooftops that have different names, different cities, different approaches, different teams, you want to be able to thread through that and try to find the similarities more than the differences that will allow you to deploy or help deploy content, get them up and running or moving faster and upward quicker. This is a place where guidebooks and playbooks can become very, very powerful for you. If you're able to develop and build an opportunity book or a brand guidelines book for tone and whatever else, sales tactics, anything, right? Any marketing or sales opportunities that you can get out. It's a big play there. That will allow some flexibility within guardrails, which can be very valuable. So enabling network-wide reporting would be the next thing we would aim to focus on. This can be a very daunting task, to be transparent with everyone. This can really be a big deal. It can also seem like it's a Herculean effort that can be very difficult to overcome. But it is important to try to find an analytics partner who can either plug into your ecosystem and make sense of all that data, or somebody who could set up a reporting framework off of all of these different websites and web platforms and be able to pull meaningful insights and reports to you. So once that happens and you get this data, being able to provide meaningful guidance backed by it is important. And that again is another place where I will point out the opportunity for something like a playbook. Because if you're able to take everybody's data and you can see through lines and common threads that they may not be able to, you're then able to build playbooks for your entire network to give everybody a boost. And part of that, point four here, will be able to help define success metrics that can be applied to individual retailers and their circumstances. So this can go from everybody to just a couple people. And this may be the concept of regional groups or even citywide groups. You can do this however you want, but it is important to take a holistic view of the motion, movement, success, and opportunity of the business at large, and then start to fragment that out to try to help everybody equally. So making those strategic adjustments based on data and analytics will help further improve visibility. Ideally, it will help improve sentiment as well, and the AI prompt responses for the individual rooftops under the decentralized network. So that is a ton of information on centralized and decentralized networks. I'll be happy to field questions in the Q&A section, but for right now, I'm going to kick it back to Mick with a little bit of a wrap up here for us.
Yeah, we're gonna talk just for a quick second on where we think we might see immediate future changes with AI. What you've just kind of seen wraps up the bulk of our presentation as far as it relates to brand to local. So if you've got questions, now would be a great time to get them into the chat. On the horizon, or where we think this is going immediately, at the end of last year, and actually a couple times so far in January, we've seen brands announce ways that and when I say brands, I should say we've seen AI engine companies announce ways that we're going to enable product purchases within the engines themselves. So think about going to ChatGPT, doing a search for like running shoes, for example, like I mentioned earlier, and being able to click a button in there to order shoes in my size that would be delivered to my door without ever going to Nike.com or BrooksRunning.com as examples, right? And this relates to this concept that we really haven't talked about, but we should probably at least mention, which is zero-click search. So zero-click search is something that we're seeing on the rise, which is basically a consumer goes to an AI engine, does a search, gets the answer that they're looking for, and never visits a website. That answer could be something that leads them to make a purchase or visit your store, but they never actually go to the website. This isn't a loss for you, right? The business still comes to you, the click, the visit, the purchase, but it's not something that we can track today. And so this is where we should expect things to continue to move, is less visibility into at least AI-specific data for now, until these engines provide new reporting mechanisms, which we haven't quite seen yet. And then ads and sponsored results. So most of us aren't seeing things like sponsored links or ads in our AI searches today, but we know that that's just around the corner. It's pervasive in traditional search. We know that they're most likely just waiting for a certain amount of adoption before those things get integrated, and that will probably look different on different platforms. So ChatGPT and Perplexity and Gemini will probably integrate this in different ways. I think the concern there is that we might have a very fragmented way to advertise across these different platforms. The bonus, though, is with that advertising will probably come analytics that don't exist today. So we're both sort of half dreading, half looking forward to having some analytics, but also the impact that might have on the user experience. And then future growth. As I mentioned before, AI is projected to grow significantly, particularly its impact on search and how people use the web. We've seen announcements for things like AI-based web browsers. OpenAI has an AI-based web browser that allows you to see the web very differently than you do via something like Chrome or Edge or Firefox today. And so these are all going to change how we interact with the web and how AI sort of influences that day-to-day experience. So we can wrap up here with a couple of, I think, takeaways. We wanted to make sure that you had something you could do, right after this or tomorrow, if you've got a slow Friday afternoon, some sample prompts that you might be able to run in AI engines so that you can start to get a feel for what your brand looks like. What's your brand visibility? What's your brand sentiment? So I would encourage you to open up something like Google's AI mode, ChatGPT, and Perplexity. Look at all three because all three of them approach these slightly differently, and ask some of these prompts. Compare my brand against my competitor's brand. Compare Ansira against brand X. Or if you know who three of your competitors are, ask for a table that compares all four of you. Summarize negative reviews about my brand is a great one to sort of understand what does AI think are your brand's greatest challenges? Because that sentiment and that theme is what AI is communicating to users who ask about your brand, or it may be something that influences AI to include your brand in the response or not. So these would be two great ways to get started on understanding how is AI how does AI perceive my brand and what message is it giving to users about my brand who may be prospects, and am I gaining traction with those prospects or am I losing traction with those prospects? And then finally, try to stay informed. A lot is happening quickly, and having a trusted partner or a trusted news source, whether that's a podcast or a newspaper's particular section about AI, having a place that you can reference regularly to understand what's happening in the market. Not all of it will be relevant to your individual situation all the time, but you'll be able to pick out, oh, that's for this particular thing. Mick and Eric talked about that in that Ansira webinar. I need to kind of revisit or relook at that. I think now we are going to get into Q&A. We had a couple questions that were submitted ahead of time, and I think we've had one or two come into the chat since then. So Josh, can you kind of run us through where we should start?
Absolutely. So I've been monitoring the questions coming through the Q&A. I see I got one more to check on. But first, let's go into one that I've also been really curious about as well. How do you preserve proprietary information about your business if you also use Chat GPT for business analysis?
So I think this is the one that Mimi submitted ahead of time. Mimi, thank you for this question. Um, this kind of falls a little bit outside the realm of like optimizing your brand strategy, but it's a very important aspect of a brand's strategy as it relates to AI. One thing that we have done internally is build a sort of like an AI governance policy of like what types of information can we share with AI or not, but also how can you scrub individual client data? Or if you're using ChatGPT for business analysis, can you strip out individual references to brand specific information? So maybe instead of product, product A, product B, product C, you can have like placeholders for those things when you submit it to ChatGPT in your spreadsheet. One thing that I don't know everyone's situation. One thing that we've done at Ansira is we have internal instances of certain AI tools that we can use that don't access the rest of the web, so that when we submit something to our AI agent, it stays internal. That has allowed us to enhance sort of our business processes. But I really think it comes down to an AI governance policy, which is not something, frankly, that I can guide you on very specifically. But there is a lot of great information out there, as a lot of people are building these AI governance policies as we speak.
Awesome. All right. And next, I have a kind of a twofer for you. This is from the chat. Maya asked, how important is it to use keywords in organic social media to optimize AEO? And then to that, we're going to add, let's see, what role does organic social play in SEO and AEO?
I think Maya submitted both of those, so thank you, Maya. We'll talk about let's talk about both of those. I think the one from the chat is probably the easiest to answer, which was that was the keywords question, Josh.
Yes. How important is it to use keywords in organic social media to optimize AEO?
That's something that's has been, I think, growing in importance over, or I'd say the last 18 months or so. And really the driver there is different generations of people are using social media as kind of search engines or brand discovery engines is another way to think about it. People want to know how a brand, particularly the younger generations, how a brand presents itself on social media. And they use that as a way to inform opinions about a brand. And so they're quite literally searching for products or brands on social media. And so there is a component where the keywords you use can influence visibility in social media platforms. I think if we want to extend that to how we know answer engines use social media, answer engines are going to pick up on those keywords even more so than a traditional search engine would in the past. Answer engines are going to be able to recognize those keywords as relevant to a user prompt or query and pull that social media discussion or post into informing its answer that it gives to that user. So it's something that like, how important is it? It's really hard to give you like a number or a weight. It really depends on like your particular demographic of customer. If your particular demographic leans younger, it's going to be more important for you. If your particular demographic leans a little bit older, it's going to be less important for you because they're not using TikTok and Instagram and things in that particular manner. And then I want to make sure we address the second part of that question, which was, let me pull up here. What role does organic social play in SEO and AEO? I'm going to answer these two separate ways because they are influenced kind of in different manners. Let's talk about SEO first. What role does organic social play in SEO? Organic social plays an indirect role in your SEO performance. What organic social can do is it can influence user mentions about your brand, which can lead to links about your brand. So if people are creating links to your brand or your products or services because they're sharing this great experience they had, or they bought this product that meets somebody else's need and they share that link, that can drive traffic to your website. In the right context, it can also drive a link to your website, which is something that Google uses as a trust signal. So it can indirectly drive traffic and trust signals to your website. It's not something that we have traditionally used to improve SEO performance because it requires a lot of effort to influence that Google search ranking. Now, that story is a little bit different when we think about an answer engine experience because we know that answer engines give a lot more weight to the social media discussions that are having about your brand. So actually, organic social plays, I think we've hopefully addressed this in part through our conversation so far today on the webinar. It plays a significant role in how AI engines present your brand in prompt responses to users. So having a consistent social media strategy, ideally one that's posting regularly about your brand, its message, has high quality content that also is distributed to your partners. That's going to play a significant impact, not just for your brand specific mentions, but also your partner mentions when it gets down to a local level. If someone's looking for recommendations for a plumber in the local area, that can weigh in, right? If someone's got discussion about that particular plumbing outfit, and that's in a positive light, that's going to shine through in an AI search result. So I think it's, more important for AEO than it has been for SEO. And with the projections of answer engine optimization, or I should say AI search use over the next couple of years, I think it's going to grow in importance.
Awesome. So we have a couple more from the chat here. Jeff asked, in-engine purchasing is interesting. Is appointment setting a capability also on the horizon?
Eric, have you heard anything about that explicitly?
Not explicitly, but implicitly, I have. It's a very, very good question. I think if you do a comprehensive research bout on this, you probably won't find anything concrete. What I will say is that the world that we're entering, I think, is ripe for that.
Yeah.
So while I haven't seen anything explicitly about it, I think it's very safe to bet that within the next 5 years, you're going to start to see a lot more integrations of sales opportunities, appointment opportunities within something like ChatGPT. And the groundwork is already there with the existing partnership between Walmart and Google Gemini.
Yeah.
And Google Gemini is the one that Mick alluded to earlier, will be in cars soon. So you can already start to see how that groundwork is laid for that sort of thing to come up.
I think it's definitely coming, Jeff. I would be surprised if no one is building an AI agent to try and do that today. And what we'll see is just like, is there one platform in particular that becomes well known for? It's easy to schedule an appointment a lot at like restaurants, for example, on Google's knowledge panel today. If you're looking for a restaurant, I think we're going to see that definitely, but no publication about it quite yet.
All right. And then this is also from Jeff. To stay informed, do you guys have any recommended podcasts, YouTube channels that you like to speak or that speak on this topic?
Oh, great question. Let's was not prepared for that. Let's collect answers between Eric and myself, and we'll send that out with the notes after this presentation. But yes, we can help there.
And I will say also keep an eye on the Ansira LinkedIn page. We do publish our blogs on there. I put the links to the two that Mick mentioned earlier in the chat, but when we release new ones, they will be published on there. So you'll find some helpful information on that front there.
What else do we have, Josh?
All right, let's see. Uh, how to know if the website's content is being quoted by AI and how to report it to clients.
That is a good question. There's a lot of avenues that you can go through there, and just to highlight a couple of the approaches real quick. So most of, if not all of the major players in the analytics space right now, and by that I mean SEMrush, Ahrefs, Moz, etc., are developing their own proprietary technology to track, monitor, and report on AI visibility in large language model prompts, AI overview, etc. So there is already some analytics solutions for that. Mick and I spend a fair amount of time also developing our own that we feel have, the most impactful, unique cocktail to that. I think the bottom line answer is it depends on who you're reporting to. It depends on what their needs are, and it depends on what their goals are on how you want to report on that. Is it just a number? Is it the actual queries? Is it the actual prompts? Is sentiment a solution to that? There are a lot of ways to do it, and there are a lot of solutions to those problems. So I would encourage you to look around at some of the major players and see what best fits your needs.
Yeah, I think one way to start is like there are two ways to do this because there's so many, pardon me, because there's so many permutations of prompts that AI can ask. It's really difficult to build a tool that does this at scale. One thing you can try is doing like very specific manual searches like that should definitely prompt your product. So let's say, for example, I wrote a blog article about measuring success in AI search. I could ask a very specific question that references a point brought up in that blog article and see if that's surfaced, right? If that comes up because I asked a very specific question, I have high confidence that AI is seeing the content and will surface it for some questions. And then I can ask vaguer versions of that prompt to see like how vague can I get before that article is no longer relevant. That's a tedious manual process, but like that is maybe one thing you can start to experiment with to understand like, is this a concern for me today that I do need to address, or is it maybe not as much of a concern that I don't need to address? But yeah, we should expect enhanced reporting capabilities throughout this year.
Amazing. Awesome. Mick, Eric, thank you. In the interest of time, I do want to go ahead and let everybody know that we appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us today and give you some ideas on what to expect with our webinars here in the future. So we do have another one planned coming up that we want to invite you to. It's going to be data analytics, insights, and reporting. That's going to be on March 12th. Again, if you keep an eye on the Ansira LinkedIn page, you'll be able to have information on updates on when these are happening or any more that will be added to the schedule. So keep an eye on that. Also, to wrap up, I want to make sure you have this QR code. If you scan that, it's going to take you to where you can get in contact with us, ask any questions, maybe some follow-ups that come to mind afterwards. The biggest takeaway isn't just about tools or tactics. It's about alignment. So strategy, technology, and teams are working together towards the same goal. Complexity is going to start to disappear and real progress is going to start to show up. What we've shared today is meant to be practical, not theoretical. So ideas you can take back, pressure test, and adapt to your own environment. Progress doesn't come from doing everything at once. It comes from taking the next step with clarity and confidence. But it's also about controlling that narrative. So as Mick pointed out earlier on, to ensure that AI knows all the best details of who you are, as well as the recommendations that we got from Eric about creating your guidebooks, making strategic adjustments, and staying with that forward thinking approach. So we appreciate you joining us today and spending this time with us. We're excited to continue the conversation, whether that's answering more questions, digging deeper, or helping you figure out what those next steps look like for your organization.